Part 1, The Pillow from the Funeral. The funeral was quiet. Too quiet for someone like Margaret Miller, who had been the center of every room she entered. Her laughter had filled kitchens, her stories had drawn in generations, and her iron will had shaped the family. But now, in a lonely wooden coffin nestled in a modest chapel in Ash Hollow, she lay still. Her face was pale, peaceful, and expressionless. It unsettled David Miller, her only grandson. David, a 28-year-old project coordinator from the city, hadn't been back to the countryside in nearly a decade. The smells of damp earth, rotting leaves, and burning incense stirred memories he didn't want to deal with. He stood stiffly near the casket, surrounded by solemn-faced relatives and whispering villagers dressed in black. His mother had passed years earlier, and his father had been absent for as long as he could remember. Margaret had practically raised him, until he decided he wanted nothing to do with small-town superstition and ran for the neon-lit chaos of the city. "She always said she'd never rest if her head wasn't laid on that pillow," said Mrs. Holloway, the elderly neighbor who had known Margaret since childhood. Hand-stitched it herself, filled it with lavender and her own hair. David blinked. Her own hair? An old country custom, to stay connected. He tried to laugh it off, but her tone was too serious. Later, after the guests had dispersed and the coffin was sealed, David lingered. The villagers had turned their backs as the casket was lowered. But something about it felt incomplete to him. His grandmother's head had rested on that strange, small, lavender-embroidered pillow. He reached in just before they closed the lid and slipped it out, almost on impulse. It was soft and smelled faintly of her perfume, jasmine and rosemary. "Don't take that," Mrs. Holloway warned, her voice quivering. "I just want something to remember her by," he replied. "Then take the locket, not the pillow. That was made for death, not for life." He ignored her. Back in his apartment in the city, David unpacked his suitcase in silence. His one-bedroom flat was sterile and cold, the opposite of Margaret's creaky old house, where every surface had a doily and every wall was lined with sepia-toned photographs. He tossed his clothes aside and pulled out the pillow. It looked more out of place than he expected, a quaint old-fashioned thing in the middle of his modern bedroom. Embroidered roses lined its edges, and in the center were the initials MM stitched in red thread. He pressed it to his face and took a deep breath. The smell, her smell, still lingered. Nostalgia hit him hard. He laid it gently on his bed. That night, he slept deeper than he had in months. No city sounds bothered him, no nightmares. But as he drifted toward sleep, he thought he heard something, a faint breathing beside him, steady and slow. When he opened his eyes, no one was there. He chuckled, blaming exhaustion. But the breathing came again the next night, and the next. Cold fingers and warm whispers. On the fourth night, David woke up suddenly, not from a sound, but from a touch. Something had stroked his hair. He sat upright in bed, heart pounding. The room was dark. He switched on the lamp. No one. He glanced at the pillow. It sat there innocently, as if mocking him. He tried to sleep again, but kept feeling a presence beside him, not necessarily malicious, but definitely there. When he finally drifted off, he dreamt of Margaret. Not how she was in life, but how she looked in the coffin, still, pale, lips sewn shut. In the dream, she opened her eyes. "Why did you take it, David?" she asked. He woke up drenched in sweat. Something's not right. Over the next week, things got worse. He began to wake up with bruises on his arms and neck, as though someone had gripped him tightly during the night. The smell of lavender grew stronger, too strong, unnatural. His sheets, always clean, began to carry a scent of damp soil. His apartment lights flickered. Shadows moved without cause. Doors creaked open slowly, even when locked. He threw the pillow into the hallway closet. That night, the whispers came. "You left me. I'm still here. Don't forget me, David." The whispers came from inside the closet. He opened it, flashlight in hand, and found the pillow sitting on the top shelf, pristine, folded neatly as if waiting for him. Desperate answers. David began researching, not Google searches, but old books, folklore forums, occult message boards. The phrase death pillow came up repeatedly. A death pillow is often made by the dying themselves, filled with pieces of their body, hair, sometimes teeth or fingernails. The item acts as a spirit anchor, allowing the soul to return or remain. To disturb such an object is to invite the dead back into the realm of the living. That night, David drove back to Ash Hollow. He needed answers. The keeper of the dead. He found Eleanor Gray, a 70-something woman who lived in a small cottage near the woods. She had been his grandmother's childhood friend, and someone the villagers called the keeper of the dead. They whispered that she knew old magic, old secrets, and things best left untouched. When he knocked on her door, she answered immediately, as though she'd been expecting him. "You took the pillow, didn't you?" she asked. David nodded. She let him in without another word. Her house was filled with jars of herbs, faded photographs, dried flowers, and books older than he was. In the center of the room, a candle burned with a blue flame. She stitched it with her own hair, stuffed it with lavender to mask the scent of the earth. "But there's more inside, isn't there?" Eleanor said, narrowing her eyes. David swallowed. "I don't know. I haven't opened it." "You must never open it. What's inside binds her to this world." "I didn't mean to call her back." "You didn't call her. You freed her." Eleanor explained that Margaret had been preparing for death for years. She had made the pillow to keep her spirit in the coffin, anchored, to help her rest. But when David took it, he broke the boundary. Margaret's spirit now wandered freely, clinging to the one she trusted most. "She thinks you're lonely. She thinks you need her. But the dead don't know how to love the living without hurting them," Eleanor warned. "Can I give it back?" "You can't just drop it at her grave like a lost sock. The bond must be severed, properly, or she'll never leave." Denial and return. David returned to the city, pillow in hand. He locked it in a wooden box and left it in the basement of his apartment. That night he heard scratching under the bed. He checked. Nothing. But when he went into his room later, the pillow was back on his bed, warm, plump, and freshly scented. Then came the final straw. David brought a date home. Her name was Melissa, and they had met at a gallery. She stayed the night, but around 3 a.m. she woke up screaming. "I heard someone breathing next to me," she gasped. "Then I saw her, an old woman, watching me from the foot of the bed." David didn't need to ask who. He apologized, tried to calm her down, but she left in tears and never answered his calls again. He sat alone on the bed, pillow in hand. "You're hurting me," he whispered. The pillow grew cold in his arms. A final decision. David returned to Ash Hollow a second time. Eleanor agreed to help, but only if he was serious. Once we start, there's no stopping midway. She might fight back." "I just want her to rest," David said. "Then prepare. It will take more than prayer. You disturbed old magic. Only old magic will fix it." Part 2. The Curse of the Fabric. The night air in Ash Hollow clung to David like a damp blanket as he stepped onto the cracked stone path leading to Eleanor Gray's cottage. He clutched a canvas bag tightly against his chest. Inside it, the cursed pillow sat, seemingly calm but radiating a cold that seeped through the fabric. He had wrapped it in 3 layers, linen, plastic, and then a thick wool scarf. But it didn't help. The cold wasn't just physical. It gnawed at his nerves, settled in his bones, and whispered doubts into his ears. He'd slept no more than 3 hours over the past 2 nights. The bruises on his body had deepened, and his apartment was no longer safe. Every room echoed with footsteps. Faucets turned on by themselves. The lights flickered, dimmed, and sometimes went out altogether, always at 3:33 a.m. And the voice, his grandmother's voice, kept returning, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in dreams. "You're not alone. You'll never be alone again." Eleanor's ritual. Eleanor opened the door before he knocked, dressed in black, her long gray hair tied tightly behind her head. She didn't smile. "Is it with you?" she asked. David nodded. "Then follow me. We begin now." Her cottage had been transformed. The furniture had been moved to the edges of the room. In the center, a wide circle was drawn on the wooden floor in black chalk, etched with strange symbols and lined with small bones. Bird, mouse, maybe even human. 12 black candles were lit at each point of the circle, flickering with strange, unnatural light. The air was thick with the scent of dried herbs and something more metallic. Blood. Eleanor motioned for him to place the bag in the circle. David hesitated. "What if this doesn't work?" "Then you'll carry her forever," she said, "even after your bones rot." He dropped the pillow in the center of the circle. The moment it hit the floor, every candle in the room flickered violently. The wooden floorboards groaned. "She knows," Eleanor whispered. "She's listening." The binding spell. Eleanor began chanting in a language David didn't recognize, deep, rhythmic, and harsh. The flames twisted unnaturally, casting long shadows that slithered along the walls. The bag began to move, twitching like something alive inside. David took a step back. "She's resisting," Eleanor said between chants. "She doesn't want to go." The pillow burst from the bag without warning, launching into the air before slamming back to the floor. The linen cloth ripped apart, and the pillow rolled to a stop, face up, as if staring at David. The embroidered MM glowed faintly red. Eleanor continued the chant, louder now, sweat pouring down her face. The floorboards beneath the pillow began to crack. From within the fabric, a black liquid seeped out, thick, tar-like, and reeking of mold and decay. David gagged. "She's not your grandmother anymore," Eleanor said through clenched teeth. "What came back is only a fragment of what she once was." The possession. The candles flickered out one by one. Darkness. Then a voice, loud and clear. David, he turned. The room had shifted. It wasn't Eleanor's cottage anymore. He was standing in Margaret's old bedroom, the one from his childhood. The wallpaper was peeling. The bed was unmade. On the wall hung a large, faded portrait of Margaret, but her eyes had been scratched out. He tried to move, but his legs wouldn't respond. From the corner of the room, the bed creaked. She sat up. Margaret. Her face was pale, bloated, her skin cracked like dry paper. Her eyes were hollow pits, black as coal. Her lips were sewn shut, but the voice came from her anyway. "Why did you leave me?" I didn't know," David said, backing away. "I didn't mean to. You took what was mine. I just wanted something to remember you by." Her head tilted slowly. Her neck cracked. "You took the anchor. Now I'm drifting, and I found my way back to you." She stepped off the bed. Her bare feet left bloody footprints on the wooden floor. David screamed, then everything shattered like glass. Back in the ritual circle, he gasped awake on the floor of the cottage, chest heaving. The candles were out, and Eleanor lay motionless in the corner. The pillow sat where it had been, but now it had split open, torn at the seams. From inside, David saw the horror she had sewn into it. Teeth. Small human teeth. Bones. Clumps of dried hair. Fingernails. A single yellowed eye, glassy and cracked, stared up at him from the stuffing. David dropped it and vomited. Eleanor stirred. "Did it work?" he asked, rushing to her. She coughed, her skin pale and cold. "Not yet. This is only the beginning." The curse unleashed. In the following days, David stayed in Ash Hollow. He couldn't go back to the city. Not yet. Eleanor was recovering slowly. She warned him that something had changed. "She's no longer tied to the pillow, but now she's tied to you." "Then I need to sever it, all of it," David said. "There's only one way," she whispered. "You must finish what she started." "Bury her again?" Eleanor looked him in the eye. "You must complete the pillow." David recoiled. "What does that mean?" "She made it with her hair, her bones, her will, but it's unfinished, incomplete. That's why the spirit roams. You must give it what it needs to rest." "And what does it need?" She didn't answer, but David knew. He saw it in her eyes. It needed him. Into the grave. That night, David returned to his grandmother's grave. He dug through the wet earth with his bare hands, sobbing, coughing. It took hours. Finally, the wooden casket appeared, bloated and damp. The wood had split open slightly. Inside, her corpse lay still, rotting. But the face was turned toward him, as if waiting. He pulled the pillow from the bag, now rest-stitched with new thread Eleanor had given him, woven with iron filings and protective herbs. But it wasn't enough. He knew it. He took out a pair of scissors, clipped strands of his own hair. Then, trembling, he pulled out a tooth, screaming through the pain. He tucked them into the pillow, a piece of himself, a trade. Then, slowly, he placed the pillow beneath her head. For a moment, everything was still. Then, the air changed. A deep sigh escaped from the corpse. The smell of flowers, real ones, not rot, not lavender, roses, filled the air. And the sky above Ash Hollow turned eerily calm, almost free. The next morning, David returned to Eleanor's. He's pale, shivering, feverish. "She accepted the offering," she said. "She's resting, for now. But why do I feel like something is still with me? Because you've opened the door. Even if she's gone, others may come. They know you now. You carry the scent of death." "I just want to live in peace," David whispered. Eleanor placed a protective charm in his palm, a coin wrapped in old cloth marked with red ink. "Keep this near your bed," she said. "And whatever you do, never take anything from the dead again." He nodded. The new life. Weeks passed. The nightmares faded. The bruises healed. The lights no longer flickered. David moved to a new apartment, changed his phone number, took a leave from work. He began sleeping again, though lightly. One evening, as he unpacked a box of his belongings, he found something strange. A small embroidered pillow. Not the same one, but almost identical. Same roses, same initials, but this time, DM, his own. He froze. Trembling, he picked it up. It smelled of earth and roses. A whisper tickled his ear. "Thank you for remembering me." Part 3, The Final Night. The new apartment was quiet. Too quiet. David Miller had done everything Eleanor told him. Moved cities, cleansed himself, buried the cursed pillow with an offering of his own and blown. And for a while, life returned to normal. He stopped seeing shadows in mirrors. His sleep deepened. The scent of lavender and soil faded. Even the whispers had gone. Until last night, when he found the pillow again. It wasn't over. It was tucked at the bottom of a moving box he hadn't opened. A small pillow, nearly identical to the one he buried, soft, embroidered with roses, but this time marked with his initials, DM. He stared at it in disbelief. He hadn't packed it. He hadn't even owned it. But it smelled familiar. Not lavender now. Rose petals and wet earth. David called Eleanor immediately. "You told me it was over," he said, pacing his apartment, voice shaking. "Did you touch it?" she asked, her voice hoarse. I had to. I had to move it." Eleanor went silent for a long time. "I feared this," she finally said. "It's not her anymore." "What do you mean?" "She's resting, but something else was watching through her. The pillow was a doorway, David, and now it's open on both ends." Dreams that weren't dreams. That night he dreamt he was back in the graveyard. But this time he wasn't standing over the coffin. He was inside it. The wooden lid was sealed above him, and the pillow was beneath his head. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Soil began pouring in through the cracks, flooding his mouth and eyes. Something was beside him, curled up like a sleeping animal. A voice whispered, "You made room for me." He woke up gasping, choking on nothing. And the pillow, the new pillow, was under his head. He had locked it in a storage closet the night before, the return of the dead. Lights began to flicker again, not just in his apartment, in the entire building. The landlord accused him of tampering with the wiring. Neighbors began hearing things, a woman sobbing in the hallway, someone knocking from inside their walls. David tried to leave, packed a suitcase, booked a hotel, but every time he walked out the front door, he'd find himself walking right back into the apartment, as if the world had twisted and folded in on itself. Trapped. He called Eleanor again. No answer. He tried to drive out of town. The streets kept looping. Every road sign pointed back to Sable Heights, the neighborhood where he now lived. And the pillow? It moved on its own now. He'd place it in a drawer. An hour later, it would be sitting in his office chair. He burned it. It returned the next morning without a scorch mark. Eleanor's last message. On the third day, David received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside, a small notebook wrapped in string. The handwriting inside was Eleanor's, jagged and rushed. "David, if you're reading this, I've likely failed. The entity has taken root in you. It's using the bond you created through the pillow to access the veil, the boundary between here and what lies beyond. This is not your grandmother. It never was. It was something older, something that wears the dead like a coat. Do not sleep with the pillow. Do not bury it. Do not give it away. The final night will come soon. You must confront it. Only fire and blood will break the final bond. I'm sorry. I wish I told you more." The rest of the pages were blank. That night, Eleanor's house burned to the ground. The news called it an accident. David knew better. The final night begins. July 19th. It started at 11:30 p.m. The pillow began to pulse, literally pulse, like a beating heart. He threw it in the bathtub, covered it with boiling water and bleach. It screamed, not loudly but deep, like 1,000 voices whispering in pain. His walls began bleeding. At first just a few streaks, then rivulets. The floor creaked constantly, even when he stood still. And then the door started opening. slowly, one by one. At midnight, the lights went out. A knock came at the front door. Then another at the back. Then another. From inside the bedroom closet, he barricaded himself in the kitchen, knife in hand, candle lit. But the air grew cold. The candle flickered and died. And then she appeared. The entity revealed. It wasn't Margaret. It wore her skin like a memory, the same floral dress, the same hands that once held his. But the eyes were wrong, too many of them, blinking from her cheeks, her neck, her chest, watching him. Her mouth opened and didn't stop, stretching impossibly wide, splitting at the corners. Inside, he saw teeth, rows and rows of them. Some were his own. "You invited me," the thing whispered. Its voice was a blend of his grandmother's, Eleanor's, and his own. "No," he said, "I never. You mourned, you touched, you gave." The thing stepped closer. David backed to the wall. "What are you?" "I am what sleeps behind the veil, what the dead dream of. You gave me shape." It reached into the shadows and pulled out the pillow. This time it bled, real blood, dark, thick, human. "You made this with her, then with yourself. One more offering, and I stay." The lights in the apartment exploded. The ritual of fire and blood. David remembered Eleanor's final words. Only fire and blood will break the final bond. He ran, grabbed the iron knife Eleanor had gifted him, the one she said was for cutting ties, not flesh. He lit the stove, fire, real fire, and turned to face the creature. "I'm ending this," he whispered. The pillow pulsed violently now, as if something inside it wanted out. David slashed the pillow open, not with the knife, but with a broken shard of glass from the mirror the entity had shattered. His blood mixed with the stuffing, hair, teeth, his own and Margaret's. But something else too, a third presence, eyes that blinked without flesh, a tongue that writhed on its own. He threw it into the stove. The entity screamed. Everything. The walls, the floor, the air shook. The fire roared high, unnatural, turning blue, then white. The screams became thousands, wailing, pleading, cursing. And then silence. The fire died by morning. His apartment was intact, untouched, save for scorch marks around the stove. The pillow was gone, not burned, vanished. Only ash remained, shaped vaguely like a human head. David stepped outside for the first time in days. The world was normal again. The loop had ended. Time moved forward. He checked the news. No strange deaths, no power outages, no fires. Eleanor's death was ruled an electrical accident. No one else remembered anything. One last whisper. David moved again. New name, new job, new city. He never touched anything from the dead again. But on his 30th birthday, he received a small package. No note. No name. Inside, a pillow, plain white. No embroidery, no initials. He stared at it for hours. Then as he reached to touch it, a voice whispered, soft and almost kind, "Let me rest my head a little while longer." He left the pillow in a church pew that night. He never looked back.